Good evening, people. How are y'all tonight? It's your man Donald King. Let me get center frame here. Center frame there. Hopefully that's a little bit better. Anywho, I hope all of y'all are doing good out there. It was a lovely day. Got the windows open, so you might get a little bit of background noise from some chirping birds and maybe some cars in passing. But you should still be able to hear me fairly well. Also got a fan going in here. It's kind of warm in here. Warm today. Warm yesterday. Even warmer today. Old Family Guy reference. It's an old school Family Guy reference. God, that show's been on the air for a long time. My God. Anywho, what y'all up to, man? Y'all good? Y'all good? Hopefully everybody's doing good out there. Sorry about getting started so late. It's all on me. I managed my time a little poorly today. I thought I had more time to play with than I did, and apparently I got started a little late as a result of that. So somehow I get here late, but I'm right on time. So let's hope that's what turns out. You know, the subject of tonight, we're going to talk about trauma, and we keep having to go back to the subject of trauma because, again, trauma is so much deeper than people give it credit for being. You know, and the reason why I think is because humans, we have a tendency to sort of misappropriate meanings. We have all these meanings that sort of interlap and overlay, and we tend to source meanings to concepts that don't necessarily fit with you know, what an actual thing or phenomenon is. And I know that sounded kind of wonky coming out, but oddly enough, it's going to sound wonky. The way that this language is structured, it's a slave's tongue. It's meant to confound the senses. English and all languages that are based in idealism, notably modern languages, they're meant to make you dumb. They're meant to create prisons of the mind wherein you have all these ironies and these overlapping meanings and synonyms and homonyms, which ultimately result in, you know, a grand state of confusion. And if you're not going to be confused, then in order to be concise, you have to be very mechanical with language, and everything has to be, you can't speak at the level of the lay person. So take, for instance, scientific articles. Because the words used in there, specifically with respect to key terms, are organized mechanically, the end product of individuals' efforts to investigate and thoroughly analyze phenomena, they are cumbersome and difficult to understand and navigate through if you're not accustomed to thinking in that structure of language. So this is one of the problems that you run into with English. English is a language that is meant to stupefy, okay? As are most languages, tracing back to the root languages and whatnot, Sanskrit, Latin, Romantic languages, and the whole nine. Anywho, the reason why it's important to understand that is because we're dealing with trauma. You know, for the last couple of days, I've been talking about for the last couple of episodes, I've been really getting into trauma and talking about what trauma is. Trauma is the fear of becoming powerless. Now, the reason why I'm circling back to it tonight is because it's not just a fear of becoming powerless. It is a phobia of disempowerment. Okay? The socialization process is traumatizing. It conditions people to be phobic of being disempowered. There are so many things this applies to. It pretty much applies to the entire species. People are scared of losing control. The loss of control is the loss of situational power. Therefore, trauma is a phobia of disempowerment. It is the fear of losing the ability to impose will onto the context or onto agents performing within the context or phenomena and effects that occur within the context and or field. Trauma is a phobia. You know what? We're going to go to Wikipedia right here only because it gives a little bit more of a breakdown of what trauma is according to how you understand it. But as you can't find it in the standard lexicon of a dictionary. But it says psychological trauma is damage to a person's mind as a result of one or more events that cause overwhelming amounts of stress that exceed the person's ability to cope or integrate the emotions involved, eventually leading to serious long-term negative consequences. Trauma is not the same as mental distress. Okay? So this is their basic breakdown, but again, I'm going to say that trauma is a phobia. It's a fear of being disempowered, and the definition supplied there doesn't negate what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's look at it like this. Let's look at it like this. A person is, for all intents and purposes, let's say they're raised in an environment where they're constantly told the world is out to get them and the world hates them. Okay? Now let's say that due to this traumatization, this person becomes deathly afraid of losing power. Let's say they become afraid of losing social power. They become afraid of losing situational power in relationships. What kind of person does that turn out? Well, it can turn out a nationalist. It can turn out an abusive man and or a chauvinist. It can turn out an abusive woman. When people become deathly afraid of being disempowered, they're traumatized. You know, the thing about phobias is that phobias are perceptual. They are not necessarily based in reality. They're what the apperception manufactures when or if it's exposed to events, phenomena, or effects that the ego perceives to be endangering to the life of its host. Again, the ego is a physical parasite located in the physical body, which is concentrated in the frontal lobes regions and spread throughout the autonomic nervous system, and it is what houses the phenomenon we refer to as perception / apperception, which is basically its mental faculty. How it imposes will onto the human host is it alters reality in the mind of the human host, causing the human host to indulge in substances and behaviors that will force their bodies to produce higher levels of chemical compounds for the ego parasite to feed on, because again, it subsists on hormones and neurotransmitters. So the ego, it feeds on things like oxytocin, vasopressin, dopamine, serotonin, insulin, epinephrine, norepinephrine, so on and so on. If the human host wants, if the ego parasite, which again is a physical parasite, if it wants insulin, it'll skew perception in the mind of the human host towards making the human host believe that they want sweet and fatty foods. If it wants oxytocin or vasopressin, it'll skew perception in the mind of the human host to make them think that they're horny or lonely. And it can also do that when it wants serotonin or things of this nature. When there's a whole breakdown. I've been going through this for years. But the point that I'm making by saying this is the ego is what fears these phenomena, these events. And because the ego is a parasitic life form, it doesn't have gates, it doesn't have parasites, they don't have like weighted appetites. They don't have weighted outlooks when it comes to things. A parasite will consume until it dies. It'll fear until it dies. It doesn't have a natural gait. It doesn't have an internal sense of balance. So the reason why it's important to understand this is because without a balance, without a way to sort of weight the things that it perceives and or observes through its respective faculties, it'll cause the human host to just have irrational fears, irrational, baseless fears in reality of things just based on the fact that it can't weight things properly itself. And that may seem a little bit hard to follow, so let me see if I can break that down a little simpler. Ego parasite. The ego parasite, all parasites, first of all, they have no internal sense of balance. Because they have no internal sense of balance, and because the ego itself is a parasite, it can't determine when enough is enough. Everything is in extremes. It'll eat, if it wants insulin, it'll make the human host eat and eat and eat and eat till the human host gets sick. And then all of a sudden, when the human host's body starts feeling sick, the ego parasite is like, oh, woe is me. Why do I hurt so bad? They didn't think about the body or the impact that causing the human host to consume that much would ultimately have on it. Because it has no internal sense of balance. The reason why it's important to understand this with respect to trauma is, if trauma is the fear of being disempowered, and it stems from the ego parasite, and the ego parasite has no internal sense of balance, then enough is never enough. If you're afraid of being disempowered, enough is never enough. What makes a tyrant go out and commit genocides and kill scores upon scores of people? Their need to feel empowered. Their need, their desire, their want, their hunger to feel powerful. What makes a pedophile abuse children? What even makes a pedophile attracted to a child to begin with? They're not attracted necessarily to the form. Your eyes aren't built for that. Your nose, like when you reach a certain level of maturity, your body gives off pheromones, like your senses and the scent of what you're attracted to should tell you this is meant for mating with. Right? What makes a pedophile look at a kid like, wow, yeah, that does it for me? What makes them do that? They're attracted to the desire to feel powerful, the desire to unilaterally act against something that is a weaker vessel. What makes a person at the top of society taking the lion's share of resources for themselves? Why do they lack this switch? Why do they lack a switch in them that says enough, off, I don't need any more? That empty bottom, that phobia of being disempowered. It transitions from having enough to not having more than everyone else. And it can't tell the difference between not having more than everyone else within a given region and not having more than everyone else in the world. The fear of disempowerment, the phobia of disempowerment, is trauma. When you see these people driving down the street, blaring music, trying to steer all the attention to themselves, why are they doing that? Yeah, they want attention. But why do they hunger for attention at all? Why do they want that sort of validation? It's based in trauma. In their formative environments, this is how you demonstrate value. This is how you demonstrate value to the world around you. And the fear of not looking valuable, the fear of being disempowered as a result of not looking valuable, the trauma makes their decision to be this way for them. What makes a racist fearful of black or yellow or brown uprising? Trauma, the fear of disempowerment. Through the American educative system, through the American domestication process, people with lighter skin are taught to believe, and it's not just America, this is around the world, so listen, let's not isolate it in this country. People are taught to believe that lighter skin imbues them, or at least should imbue them, with rights that are necessarily denied to those with dark, rich melanin pigment in their skin, eyes, and hair. And anytime someone darker than them makes any sort of social stride, they immediately start experiencing cognitive dissonance. They experience aggression. Why? Why? Their aggression is based in the fear of disempowerment. They've been traumatized by the socialization process. It's easy to call these people who are in these positions assholes and tyrants and all these other things, but it doesn't get to the mechanism behind why they are the way they are. Brother, absurd, the word comes in. Wow, it seems like anxiety matching the definition of a fear not based in reality. Yep. Anxiety, trauma, perception, all of this shit is intertwined. Every single thing that you guys see me talk about, it's intertwined, it's interconnected, it's intertwined. The reason we keep coming back to this is because this is the most important subject for this species to cover. Oftentimes we falsely equate living out our traumas and developing defensive mechanisms or defense mechanisms based on our trauma as empowerment. We think having the toughest fists make us strong, or the most money makes us tough and important, or the most clout. And in the end, all it does, all it sums to is, guys, I have the ability to ward off my trauma. When I was a kid and Star Wars just came out, right? You had all these kids that were clamoring to be Darth Vader. It never made sense to me. Why would you want to be the villain? Why would someone want to be Hitler? Why would someone want to be Genghis Khan? Why would someone want to be, even in more recent years, Donald Trump? What would make someone want to be the villain? What does the villain offer that the hero doesn't? A willingness to do whatever it takes to keep their trauma at bay, to keep their phobia at bay. It's a lot. So now we have a world full of people who are so scared to become powerless, so scared of being disempowered, that they've created this huge power vacuum. Bravado and chest thumping and aggression has replaced bravery. No one's willing to face reality and adjust to reality in real time. And everything is a shit show because people confuse aggression with empowerment. They confuse greed with empowerment. They confuse selfishness with empowerment. All to the tune of everybody having a phobia of disempowerment. There is no social circumstance this framing does not apply to. It applies to the entire species, self included. I work to rid myself of traumas still. And the only way to work through traumas, ironically, is to be honest about them. Hey, I'm afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of not being seen, not being taken care of, not being loved. You got to sit with that truth, guys. The only way to defeat trauma, the only way to grow past trauma is to first admit to it and face it. It is a phobia. You know, I used to have one of my former lovers, I won't say who, because giving too many details would isolate it, would narrow the field too much. Because I haven't been with a ton of women in my life. Fortunately. I'm kind of glad about that. I haven't been with a ton. But, she had this great fear of bridges. And every time we got to a bridge and we were driving over a bridge, she would grab my hand and squeeze it really tight. And I was an asshole back then, so it used to annoy me greatly because I couldn't understand the trauma myself. I couldn't understand that phobia, fear of bridges. And I've always been ready to go anyway. I've always been ready to get out of here. So it's like, if I go, I go. But it takes a bit of empathy to understand where people are coming from. A phobia is a phobia. If it's happening in the perception, there isn't a whole lot that you can do about it because perception is based in idealism. The faculty of perception, it transforms, I guess, sensory input and data into concepts and ideas, and then houses concepts and ideas and compounds concepts and ideas and recycles and refines them in order to create things like imagination and what have you. But, yeah. Perception happens exclusively in idealism. So you get mad at people for doing shit in reality because they can't escape the ideal realm. And the more you do to try and chastise them is the deeper you drive them into their inner story. So it becomes a great big paradox. How to reach someone and get them to come out of this identity shell, out of this perceptual prison long enough to recognize and sync up with reality so they can stop doing things to create imbalances in the world around you. It's a doozy. Even as Avatar, I struggle with that. A lot of days I'm scratching my head like, how? My very presence makes people want to retreat deeper and deeper into their inner story. It's a lot. The thing is, the deeper you go into the inner story, is the more divorced and removed from reality you become. The more divorced and removed from reality you become, is the greater your chances of making negative impacts on reality as a system, and thus incurring massive, massive debts to reality, all because you were unaware of what you were doing. It's a huge paradox. It's fucking hard to figure out. It's a crazy puzzle. But yeah, yeah. All these people, the worst people you can think of, the very worst people you can think of in the history of the species, Napoleon, uh, Jesus Christ, all the dictators, all the tyrants, every single one of them, people, men in theocracies, in theocratic countries, and they were all traumatized by their socialization processes, by their caretakers, by way of neglect, by way of like misguided attempts to make them manly or womanly, by people using them as physical or emotional or psychological punching bags. The worst people you can think of, they were all traumatized. And now they live in a society where they're forced to live hand to mouth, or even at the top of society, forced to live with the thought, the view, the notion that uprising is just around the corner. And everybody's making all these decisions based on their trauma. They hide behind these tall walls of pride, but pride is nothing but trauma. Bravado is nothing but trauma. It's the response. These things are the responses to trauma. They're the responses to the phobia. These are the defense mechanisms people came up with for fear of being stripped of power. And this is where we're at with it. Everybody's scared, but trying to act tough for fear of looking fearful and being stripped of power. So instead of facing and dealing with shit like actual brave people, they think that they're going to fix every problem in the world by simply amassing more control, amassing more power, and amassing more means to inflict injury upon others. And everybody's in a race to collect authority and or money or representations thereof. Not motivated by strength, not motivated by compassion, not motivated by higher thinking, motivated by a phobia. You know what it's like to look in the mirror, to honestly see yourself, to see behind all the pageantry, all the makeup and contouring, to look yourself dead in the eye and say, I'm scared. If you don't, you're no closer to healing than any of the people you'd point fingers at and call terrible, evil, delusional, or whatever. That's why bravery and honesty are such powerful and important things. They're the only cure for the trauma. Syncing up with reality is the only cure for the phobia. This applies across the board. To my ex, who was scared of going over bridges, the only way to get over that would be to get out and walk on the bridge and look over the edge and to face it. Maybe hang off the edge, come close enough to it so that you realize that the idea of it alone is not enough to kill you. It's coming out of idealism. You got a fear of spiders, an ungodly fear of spiders, arachnophobia. Touch a spider. Let one bite you. Ride the razor's edge. See what's what. That's how you lose your fear. You sync up with reality. Guess what? The way something looks shouldn't be enough to cripple you. The way something is perceived shouldn't be enough to cripple you or cause you to act volatilely and irrationally. You gotta get brave, man. You gotta face reality, and not from inside this cocoon of meanings you barricade yourself within and call your identity. Nah. You gotta toss that shit to the side and step into it for real. Who you pretend to be won't save you. Not from reality. Nah, you gotta face that shit clean. Stand in the flame of truth and let it burn away everything that isn't real. The deeper you live in the identity is the more given to phobias you are. The more removed from reality you are is the more the ego parasite can manipulate your view of reality and get you to do its bidding towards destroying you at its benefit, because again, parasitism is living and benefiting at the expense of another, and your ego parasite necessarily lives and benefits at the expense of you. It weaponizes this fear of loss, this fear of not having enough, this fear of being disempowered against you to the degree that it makes you psychotic. You go around trying to hurt people because someone experiencing pain as compared to you makes you feel safe by comparison. It makes you feel powerful, like you're in control. And that sense of power, that sense of control, it's mad addictive. It's very addictive. Once you get a hit of it, give it a few months or years, and well, who knows? You could become the next serial killer. Look at this asshole down in Georgia. I'm tired of these homegrown terrorists. This asshole down in Georgia, going around killing people so he could feel some type of power. That's what it boiled down to. People are like, oh, it was a hate crime. Oh, he did it for this reason. It was sexual. We believe him. We hate him. Yeah. At the end of the day, what you saw was a person who was deathly afraid of losing power. In whatever realm of consideration he was trying to capture or cling to power within, this person was deathly afraid of losing power, and in order to exercise some type of power, in order to convince himself that he was a master of his circumstance, that he had the ultimate power, he went and took his anger and frustrations out on people he knew we're defenseless to fight back. Phobias make you cowardly. Every person supporting this last administration, they were cowardly. They were weak. Even now, people at the top of society, they're all cowardly. Sure, they're tough. They think they're tough in these positions of authority. What makes them think that, though? They see the world through the slave's mind. Everything is through a lens of comparison and competition. And the underlying motivating factor, when you can unilaterally act against and or aggress against others, it gives you the ultimate feeling of power. If, as I've described, trauma is a phobia of disempowerment, then the remedy to that, the false remedy to that, is exercising power over others. It's all mechanical, guys. It's all mechanical. As is reality. You see, when you let your trauma, when you let your phobia, when you let it make decisions for you, you still have to answer for all the imbalances you create. Reality doesn't care about the backstory. It only cares about the impact. And if you let a phobia swing you into aggressing against and or trying to knuckle up against God or reality, you're to blame because you never had to indulge the phobia. You could have chosen honesty and reasoning and trying to sync up with reality instead. Those costs, those debts get charged back to you. So yeah, talking about again, trauma is the deadliest phobia. Trauma is the deadliest phobia. What humans often think is the answer to trauma is indulging in the acquisition and consumption of power. And it makes perfect sense. If trauma is the phobia of disempowerment, then the answer to the phobia of disempowerment is to get all the power, to hold all the authority, and or to be on the side of authority. It's all mechanical. All mechanical. I see Brother Absurd chimed in, but I'm wondering if it's anybody else out there. We got any other viewers in the house? Anybody out there? Kicking it with your boy? Y'all are like, we want Candace back. Donna, you get too heavy when you all by yourself. You do too much. I'm an avatar, man. It's my job to explain this stuff to you guys. It's not always going to be fun, but if you give yourself a chance to understand, you give yourself options moving forward. That's all I'm trying to do, is give you options, guys. This is going to play out only in one way. Reality destroys corruption. Anybody who's beholden to corruption as a result of trauma or as a result of pride, which is still trauma, or an aggressive spirit, which is still based in trauma, or a competitive spirit, which is still based in trauma. Trauma isn't an excuse to aggress against reality or hold corruption within you. And when reality has to cut away corruption, if you haven't learned to let go of this shit, guys, it's on you. It's on you. I'm doing everything in my power to try and help make it as clear as I possibly can. But yeah, this is what it is. I don't know if this is episode 49 or 50 of my podcast. This is crazy, man. It's like if this isn't 49, it might be 49. I've had that many episodes so far. That's crazy. We might be going on 50 episodes. Wow. That's insane. Huh. I'll be damned. I'll be damned. But yeah. So, apparently we don't have a whole lot of people in the house tonight. But that's alright. I'm out of sight. So, you know what? We're at 41 minutes. These are starting to go up a little bit longer and longer because there's more to talk about. Hopefully I dialed in well enough tonight. I don't have a whole lot of practice using some of the language models that I used tonight. So, there is a possibility I could have used better words to convey some of the concepts that I was trying to get across, but the main ones got through, I think, if you're trying to understand me. So, y'all already know what it is. It's your man, Donald King. We shoot this on Facebook Live every Monday and Wednesday at 7. And I'm going to try and get better about being on time with that. Today, again, 100% my fault. I just mistimed some things, and yeah, I just had a lot of stuff going on, but on me, I got to take that hit. So if there's no one out there, it's understood and all good. Anyway, you guys can follow me on Facebook. You can check me out on Instagram at Avatar Cycle XIII. That's Avatar Cycle 13. I have a YouTube channel to which I post all of these videos, so you can go back and sort of check them out. You can go back and sort of check them out. I have all these. I tried to number them all, so you can go back and like if there's one subject or topic that I'm covering and you want to know what that's about, you can always go back and you can find it and look through it and see if there's any content that's usable. Also, you can check me out on Medium. I post several pieces to that platform as well. I need to fly some new material over there because it's like I stockpile the stuff so quickly. It's insane. But if you get any sort of appreciation out of what I do and you want to show your boy some love, always feel free to join the Patreon family. I am, again, Avatar Cycle XIII. That's Avatar Cycle 13. And if you just want to Salt Bay your boy with a little bit of love for the daily sermon, you can, I know it's past the collection plate around, and you can hit your boy up on Cash App. All proceeds go to building this up to a larger platform. Again, I want to reach as many people as I possibly can through through whatever platform I'm able to get onto. You know, I don't know how much time I have left in this body, and I want to be as effective as I possibly can. So yeah, also last week when I was talking about people who have donated so far, I forgot to mention my brother Mark. Mark, you've done, oh my God, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate you so much. Everything is, you know, it's coming together slowly but surely, and I genuinely appreciate you. He says just an appreciation of who you are. And Brother Angel, you guys say that, like my sister Mo, just, hey, an appreciation for all you do. And that means something huge to me. Like, I'm awed by the fact that some of you all appreciate what I do. It comes from the very best place in my heart, and hopefully I can be as effective at it as I possibly can. Ooh, we got another commenter in the way. We got Brother Armando Marrero. I love that last name. Let me see. Humanity is traumatized. How we deal with it is another story. I'm no different. I use my trauma for creativity, love, compassion, even when I don't feel like it. And that's why I love you, brother. That is why I love you, because me too. You know, I talk about my trauma a lot. I got abused severely growing up. Like, pretty bad, man. I went through it, and it was physical abuse. There's lots of psychological abuse, though. You know, when I was in foster care, and you know, when I took the California Achievement Test when I was back in second grade, they had me testing at high school levels and beyond. And, you know, it's like because I used words bigger than I was supposed to, I got called Professor Donnie Butt and other such things. Made to feel like I was small and insignificant and dumb to the point that I literally began to question my self-worth. Now that I'm older and I got past my narcissism phase, again, narcissism, it stems from trauma. That need to overcompensate and to always be the center of attention and to always feel important and powerful. It's trauma. It stems from trauma. The fear of being disempowered. When I got past my trauma and sort of reclaimed myself, then all of a sudden, all of my gifts, even in the way of my talents and skills, they enhance significantly. But even now, and I'm just going back to your point here, I use my trauma as a tool to help people understand it isn't a way of being. It's something you practice. You practice living in your trauma. You practice reinforcing this notion, this fear of being disempowered. You practice fearing every day. You practice barricading yourself and your identity every day. You practice narcissism every day, and you become what you practice doing most. I'm glad that you're able to channel your trauma into something beautiful. I try to do the same thing with my work. Yeah, I've been traumatized, and even now, I'm still digging and finding new layers of bullshit within me. But the fact that I have the wherewithal to understand that a lot of it traces back to people who didn't know any better, and maybe who weren't gifted in the ways that I'm gifted, doing what they knew how to do in order to survive. It changes the paradigm. And then you sit here and you have the choice to be like what you choose to be, which is a person who learns from their traumas and wants to transform it into something beautiful, or someone who clings to their trauma and allows their hunger to feel powerful and to have control and to feel superior to others. A person who allows themselves to let their trauma run their life. You chose the opposite of that, which is bravery, which is strength. Empower people with your hurt. Don't perpetuate the cycle. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, man. And this is how it goes, guys. This is how it goes. I'm not, when I'm talking about trauma, I'm never speaking from a space of judgment. I've been through the shit myself, man. Some of the things I've seen in my life, I don't want to see them again. And I guess the downside of having the type of recall that I have is I can't forget it. So it's sort of with me all the time. But you still got to face it, man. Got to learn how to power through. All these people creating all this imbalance in the world at the top of society, because when all is said and done, they're deathly afraid of being disempowered. It changes everything that you think you know about social strength. You look at all these people who want to capture power, and it goes back to the podcast that I was talking about with true alphas versus aggressive betas. Aggressive betas want all the power. They want all the authority. They want all the control. They're always beelining towards and aligning themselves with authoritarian figures, not out of a space of strength, but out of a space of deficit and weakness. Out of a space of brokenness. The bravado, the chest thumping, the aggression, feeling empowered and emboldened whenever a cowardly ideologue and or aggressive beta gets into a position of authority and lets them unilaterally aggress against others towards imbuing them with false senses of power. They love that shit. They eat it up. But they're never acting from a space of true empowerment. We each get to choose which path we'll follow. The more you come into reality is the stronger you become. The more honest you become is the more compassionate you become. And the more well-rounded as an individual you become. The more whole. The more you delve into the identity is the more aggressive and competitive and narcissistic you become. You get to choose which path you're going to follow. But you cannot slave for two masters. It's one or the other. You're coming out of the shell into reality, or you're going deeper into the shell and cocooning yourself within your identity. But the more you cocoon yourself within your identity, is the more afraid of losing power you'll become. Again, it is all mechanically and fundamentally interconnected. Brother Armando comes back in. Look at Trump. As awful as it is, this guy is nothing but trauma. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And traumatized people look at him and they see a beacon of hope because they see a traumatized person taking power and wielding power, and their fear of powerlessness causes them to idealize and idolize this man. Their fear of being small, their fear of not being able to consume, their fear of not being enough. Where does it end? Parasites don't operate by way of balance, so as long as they let those parasites do the thinking for them, their appetite for power will never be enough. Their appetite for destruction will never be enough. Their appetite for aggression and competition will never be enough. As long as trauma is running the show, there will forever be sources of imbalance. And as such, enemies of and to reality. Yo, so getting around 53 minutes here. Guys, I want to thank you all for tuning in. Hopefully we made some ground with this. I'm going to have to look at it back. Whenever I'm in flow state, I never know how things are going to come out. And again, dealing with these languages, dealing with human languages and the paradoxicalness of them, it's so confounding. Like you literally have to go in and mechanically organize language. This language is a slave's tongue. It's meant to confound the senses and create a perceptual prison that users cannot think above, beyond, or in spite of. It is insane to look at this phenomenon from the outside in. It's wild. You're like, man, so this is designed to keep people stupid. Wow. That's some hefty engineering. But, alas, I digress. Yo, I hope you all have a pleasant evening and a good morrow. I appreciate you for tuning in. It's your man. I'm out.